seeing.
This is my counter argument, and this,
please.
They don't like this. Yeah. I say, I own firearms, right? Do anybody here own firearms? Of course, nobody wants to. Yes.
Yeah.
Have you ever committed a crime? No. Have I ever committed a crime? No. Am I going to sell drugs tomorrow? No. Do you intend on selling drugs tomorrow? No. If you pass a law today, only us in here are going to abide by that law. So you pass a law all the time that only affects the honest citizen. So why are you continually passing laws when you can arrest the criminals today? And silence, because that is the answer. Do not pass any laws. Enforce what you have. If you really want to get criminals off the street, if you just want to disarm us, then say so.
Welcome to this episode of the Colion Noir podcast, and joining me today is Rick Vasquez.
Nice to meet you, Colion.
Nice to meet you too, man.
I've seen you on TV a lot. It's great to see you in person.
Hey, man, I try, just running my mouth until I can't anymore. You know how that goes.
Then we should get along.
Oh, fair enough. Considering how we've been talking off camera, I think we'll be just fine. Now, I want to start from the beginning, just because I think there's a lot of people in my audience who probably really want to hear from you, because it's a perspective they probably don't really get. So just kind of give a brief take of your background and what you've done, and then kind of where you are now.
I'll do a quick, rapid one. I had a career in the Marines. My entire career in the Marine Corps was either on security duty or with firearms. I was a chief instructor at the Precision Weapons Shop at Quantico. I was a detachment commander of the Marine Security Guard Detachment in Moscow, Russia, which is a senior posting in all diplomatic postings. And then I left the Marine Corps and went to work for diplomatic security as a firearms and tactics instructor. Best job I ever had in my life. Yeah. But it was a contract job. And so an opening came up in ATF as a Firearms Enforcement Officer, and I really didn't know what that was. Yeah,
a lot of people still don't know what that is to this day.
You think you're going to be like a cop or something.
It sounds fancy.
Well, thank you. That's the name. And I learned in the government, you have to have certain names to be able to promote to certain levels.
Gotcha.
So our field was able to be promoted to a 13 and 14 supervisor because of that position. So they bring it on as a firearms enforcement officer, and we're the technical experts for ATF. Okay. So coming in, I had a large firearms background as far as repairing them, and a little bit of historical knowledge, and even fabricating firearms, because we did our own barreling and those sorts of things at Quantico. And then, but I learned with ATF is so much historical, and then the Gun Control Act, National Firearms Act, ITAR, all of those regulations and statutes. And as we know, I'm not an attorney, but I became a technical expert and worked my way up within 5 years to be assistant branch chief, and then held a position of branch chief and assistant branch chief for 18 months.
This is at ATF. Okay.
And then I got to the point where I could see the writing on the wall that ATF was changing.
When you were in, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but when you were there, what administration were you under?
Oh,
do you remember? Yeah,
definitely under Obama.
Okay.
And through, I can't even remember. Clinton, of course, and then through before Joe Biden.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it started changing where the emphasis became, it's a regulatory body, and a lot of people got to remember that. You regulate, so as a regulator, you have to instruct and prepare. It became, you're a regulator, let's see how we can deny and remove. And we started seeing this, and people started getting in positions that they were more interested in not how to correct the industry, but how to hinder the industry. And I'll give you something that happened this morning. I work for a lot of importers and import a lot of product. And an importer had his license, it expired, but it wasn't expired. He had a continuation. because sometimes the licenses don't just get there on time.
Okay.
And so they get so many days.
Oh, because it's like a grace period.
Yes.
Okay.
And they get a letter.
Okay.
So he put in to import a product that we had already gotten approved from ATF, and they denied his application because the date of his license was 1 July 2024. He had submitted his continuation letter with it. So they denied it, just arbitrarily denial. And this happened today.
Yeah.
So he sends this to me. He goes, "You can't get any funnier than this." Because what I do is I coach these guys. Okay.
And we're talking dealers.
Dealers
and manufacturers and importers. Okay.
You know, you have a controversial importation, but you get it approved.
Yeah.
I say, you're going to submit with your Form 6 this additional information. You submit the ATF letter or email that we received to make sure when they pop this up and said, why is this being approved for importation? Why does he want this, whatever it is, imported? Then they can have the documentation that says, okay. So then they can go check with their branch chief and make a decision. So that's why he's not required to send a continuation letter in, but he did.
Went along with.
And so that's what we started seeing. And under this administration, it has quadrupled.
Yeah.
And basically, the Attorney General is telling ATF that, as you know, you will take licenses away. You won't be as much informational. You'll be more, let's shut it down.
Yeah.
So when I saw the writing on the wall, plus I was getting to the age, like, I didn't want to work for the government anymore. I was like, I want to go out on my own. So everything was perfect timing. My youngest daughter had finished college, and just things were like right there.
Yeah.
So I worked out the door and started a consulting business. And I was very fortunate to go to work, and I'm not calling them out, but just a fact, to a company called FFL Guard. So they gave me a retainer to work for all of their FFLs. And then I was able to start my own business. So here I got my retirement, a retainer, and starting my own business. You know, all the stars aligned.
Yeah.
So I was able to walk out the door and not worry about, well, where am I going to buy pinto beans next week? So I stayed with FFL Guard for a handful of years and just went out and just hung up my own shingle. But see, one of the things that I do is I do everything. I had my own shooting school where I did private instruction. I write documents. I write manuals. I write SOPs. I testify in court as an expert. We've started active crisis consultant. We were doing government contracts. So a lot of people say, well, I want to go start my own business, but I only want to just put this one screw in.
Yeah.
No, guys, you got to get out.
You're kind of like me in a lot of ways. I'm kind of the same way. Yeah. I just want to do that and this and this and this and that within the same space, generally speaking, right?
Everything's connected.
Yeah.
So I had a security background, worked for Dimac Security. I brought on Fred Pyree, the attorney that helped me start it is here in Dallas, Jared Fabriola. And so we started a company, and now we brought on, I've sold my part back to them. They brought on 2 SEALs, and they're growing the company. You know, so that's what we did. We just did everything that we could that was firearms related to try to build up this dome.
Yep.
And it's worked out great.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's, like I said, I think I'm actually Jamaican in the many different things that I do within the space. But, you know, with your time at the ATF, okay, so you talked about how things changed. What was the catalyst? So you think it was administrations that were in place, or do you think it was just just kind of like the inner culture kind of in itself just changing on its own?
One of the things I found out, and I actually wrote a leadership paper on this, and I sent it to the director when I was there, because there's personnel issues in all government agencies. And one of the things that comes down to, depending on the agency, you have cliques, depending on the size. And if you don't recognize it, coming from the Marine Corps, I believe in, okay, if there's a nail sticking out and bothering you, pull that nail out and get rid of it, or crush it into the wood. You know, the cliques run a government agency. And a clique had taken over the firearms program that were horrible in the field. And they eventually, through time, were all relieved of their position. So everyone that came in because we were a firearms division. So anything firearms related, we worked on it. So the group that came in and just really destroyed our division.
So they were out in the field.
Yes.
And they couldn't hack it in the field.
They got promoted.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
Promoted.
So they couldn't hack it in the field. Okay. So they got promoted. And so they got promoted to the desk jobs.
Yes.
Okay.
And so now the firearms division, it is probably, other than the field operations, which actual agents working on cases, is a critical, important part of what ATF does. So they came to that area with the intent of not doing good, but with the intent of how can we screw the industry over.
But why? I mean, I guess.
It was literally personal feelings.
Okay.
And just we had an assistant director, a deputy assistant director, a division chief, and their minions that all had this mentality.
Gotcha. So it's not like the ATF is just filled to the brim with just a bunch of people who are anti-Second Amendment and want to make everything and make life as hard as possible for anyone involved in the business of firearms or owning firearms. You're saying essentially that there's cliques that, well, at least from your experience when you were there.
Oh, and you'll see so many branches that used to be considered bad branches are now superior, and so many branches were considered good branches are now not good branches. So, for example, and I like to sing praise where praise is due, the National Firearms Act branch. If you go back 15 years, not even 15 years, probably 10 years, you will hear absolute horror stories. There was a supervisor who used to go into his office and lock the door and cry at his desk because he was threatened to be killed. But because nobody takes action. True story.
Threatened to be killed by who?
By his employees. Oh. Because he was trying to make them do work.
Gotcha.
So they had a long stream, and I love calling out names that are great.
Yeah.
A long stream of supervisors in the NFA branch that turned that place around. Ken Houchins, Ernie Littner, they came in, and Ken Houchins was the division chief, and it was about work and what we're supposed to, and they just worked and worked and worked. And then you had a guy named Steve Albro come in, and I can't remember all of them, but it was just like a flood of professionals, one after the other. Because it's just like any other organization. You want to fill a job so long, then you want to take another job.
Yeah.
So these guys came in, they're fixing the NFA, and Scott Mendoza, another one. I remember these guys, and Amy Steely, and now they brought Steve Albro back. So now they're rotating, bringing these guys back. And now the NFA branch find a complaint. You know what the complaint is on the internet? Well, God, we're getting our silencers back in 4 days. I wonder when we can get them down to 1 day. When it used to be 120 days, 18 months.
Yeah.
And now you're complaining about a week?
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't experienced that. But a little birdie once told me that it's because I did it through my trust, and that if you do it individual now, you'll get it back faster.
Individuals are faster.
Okay. See, I didn't know that. I was still doing everything through trust.
There's more things to check in the trust.
Gotcha.
And okay, you're an attorney. You write a trust, and it's correct. How many of these knuckleheads you think download trust from the internet? Yeah. It's 90% of them.
Yeah.
And what's fearful is, how many of these are going to be legal?
Gotcha. Okay.
When they start transferring them. So
they have to almost go over it and analyze each trust to make sure which explains.
So the trust comes up with the form, and the analyst is looking at it. He's not an attorney.
Yeah.
So now he's got to take it to the gun attorney, and now they got to go through this and scrub it and make sure that it's okay. So
I mean, hell, even as an attorney, I had an attorney set up my trust. So yeah.
And you always hear attorneys say that if you're an attorney, have somebody else do it.
Do it, yeah.
That way you know that you can never be penalized for your work.
Yep. No, absolutely.
So the NFA is just a phenomenal branch now, and a firearms operation division.
Now, you know how weird that is for me to hear that, right? I get what you're saying, and I understand it, and I agree with you from the standpoint, yes, because I've gone through the time where it took me a year to get suppressors back, and to hear that they're coming back within weeks, kudos. I have nothing but respect for that. So it's just funny hearing it because
you don't think about it.
Yeah.
You're like, all of a sudden, how did this get fixed?
Yeah. No, this is true. Yeah.
And Firearms Operations Program Division, the one that used to be bad, is ungodly good now.
Yeah. So you mean to tell me that before that, when things were running really slow, it was largely just people not wanting to work?
That's exactly right. This is the government. You can't make them work.
So what's that quote? That's like, don't attribute to malice what can be explained by lack of incompetence or something, or lack of competence or something to that extent.
I was counseled, I won't say several, but on more than one occasion, where you jump in somebody's behind.
Yeah.
And I used a term once. If you don't want to work here, why don't you find another job? When they counseled me, that language was used by a case agent in Fast and Furious, jumping in one of his agents, and they said you should have never used that language because they used it in Fast and Furious.
So so people who don't understand what Fast and Furious is, because I know there's half of my audience that's like, you mean like the movie?
The car movie.
I know, right? Can you kind of just brief explanation about what Fast and Furious was and why? Because I plan on doing my own video about it, but for those that don't really know, just so they have context.
Unfortunately, I would give you one person's name to speak to, but he's still inactive.
Okay.
But Pete Verselli is out there talking about it, and David Voth, who was one of the few guys that got chastised, which he shouldn't have been. I say chastised, got hammered, but that he shouldn't have been. He's retired, but I don't know if he'll talk to anybody because he was scapegoated without a doubt.
Okay.
Basically, guns were being sold to, I don't want to use the term illegal, but people that shouldn't be buying guns, or people that are buying guns, they knew that they were going to the cartels. And the U.S. Attorney's Office would not give ATF the authority to raid them. So, and that's just kind of, there's all kinds of other issues.
Yeah.
So Rick goes in, and I'll use me because I am a Mexican and I'm brown. I go in and say, so I go in and say, I want to buy 5 of these AKs. So the gun dealers would call ATF, of course, after the sale, because they wanted to make the sale. Said, hey, Rick just bought 5 more AKs. So ATF would say, hey, we need to get a search warrant. And the U.S. Attorney would say, well, they're not prohibited. They didn't come back on a NICS check. You're going to have to develop a case. And I'm making it simple. I'm very simple.
Simplify, yeah.
But it got to the point where the gun dealers just quit calling and just kept selling the guns.
Gotcha. So it was actually on their own accord, the gun dealers were like, this is suspicious, highly suspicious. So let me call this in.
And they had worked out agreements.
Okay.
So, some of them had said, okay, we're going to call you. Because a lot of them, believe it or not, a lot of people don't believe this. Gun dealers don't want any criminality happen because they could lose their livelihood. And that's their livelihood. Now, of course, some of them would sell the guns first and then call, but they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And so, in a nutshell, that's kind of what happened. And then they tried to blame it all on the ATF when you had U.S. attorneys that were not allowing them, you're not signing search warrants, telling them. And then a lot of people say, well, why was ATF even asking for permission? So there's a cat and mouse thing there.
Gotcha.
But that's what happened.
So did the ATF need the permission?
Some say no. I'm not a special agent.
Gotcha.
Some say no, that they could have just gone and knocked on the door if they wanted. But if that's the way the office is set up, if the special agent in charge is working with the U.S. attorney and that's what they're being told to do, then they have to follow the rules.
Gotcha.
But of course, like I said, Pete Verselli, he's written his book and he's doing a lot of podcasts right now. And David Voth, I wish he would speak to you. He hasn't spoken to anybody yet. And he was the one that was scapegoated and took most of the heat. Okay. But he was sent there, he was the agent of the year before, and he was sent there specifically to stop what was going on, and he was doing his best to stop, but within the limitations he had.
Gotcha.
But he was the junior guy.
Yeah, they have that too. That's how it happens. Yep. So with respect to that, because I know with Fast and Furious, you have the whole cartel situation with guns going over. Was that something you were dealing with pretty consistently when you were...
One of the things that I did, I found a niche in ATF. there was nobody that would travel overseas because they can't make you go overseas. And Ramon Bazan, he's in Texas also. All these dark-skinned guys stayed in Texas. Called me up and said, "Hey, could you go to Guatemala with me? There's a cartel had gone into Guatemala and murdered a family, and the Guatemalans want our assistance to come in and look at the guns."
Yeah.
Well, man, I'll go anywhere.
Yeah.
And so they asked my supervisor, and my supervisor said, "Sure, if he'll go, then I'll go." So I went to Guatemala, and we went in and we looked at the guns and identified them. Because what we're trying to do, my role is to identify the firearms so that the agents can do a trafficking. Okay, so that gun came back to Rick Vasquez. Every single gun. They keep coming back to Rick Vasquez. Well, Rick's got a trafficking scheme going because he's selling these guns to somebody.
Yeah.
So you got to go talk to Rick and try to figure out where they're going.
Okay, so connect the dots to...
Yes.
Right.
So that was my role. And when I first went to work for ATF, I was there, 3 months. I was asked to go to Bosnia to look at the guns that were used to kill all the people in the mass crimes. And my boss came out to Ed Owen. Unfortunately, he's passed away. He was just a phenomenal guy.
Yeah.
And he just said, "Hey, would you go?" I said, "Ed, of course I'll go." And I said, "But I've only been here 3 months. Why are you asking me to go?" He goes, "Rick, you're the only one with the travel background that you have. I traveled to Colombia, Desert Storm for the Marine Corps. I traveled, for the State Department." So he said, "I know, and it's a small world, a community of firearms people, it's a small world." So they knew me before they ever hired me.
So you're like the anti-Lord of War.
Yeah. So I went over to Bosnia, and with a team from NATO, we shot, and I'm going to say every machine gun and sniper rifle that the Bosnian military had put in storage.
Really?
In 2 weeks. In 2 weeks. We shot, and they took those cartridge cases, brought them to our lab, and then the FBI has a grave team. They dug up graves and got the fired cartridge cases there, sent them to our cry lab, and got matches.
I'm sorry. Wait, what?
Yeah.
Okay. So the FBI has a grave team. So they dug up
the bodies, mass graves.
The mass graves. Oh, and so the cartridges that were still in those bodies.
Yes, because they shot them from the berm. Just mowed them down.
Wow, that is very disconcerting.
So we had actual hits, matches. And they just prosecute. Of course, they couldn't prosecute every single soldier.
Yeah. But how are they matching cartridges? Is it based on
ballistics? Yes.
Okay.
Took it right to our ATF crime lab, and our experts, the criminal technologist experts there, they matched the imprints
from the rifling, or was it from the cartridge cases? Oh, gotcha.
The cartridge cases back.
Okay.
So we just knew, we serialized every single gun, and we knew which unit it came from. So it came from 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines.
Yeah.
And so we knew those machine guns were assigned to them. So when the cartridge cases were matched, they could say, well, who was the commanding officer then? So they could go after that commanding officer. So we actually had physical evidence. ATF presented as physical evidence on behalf of our government. So this is the kind of stuff that I got to do because I was willing to travel. So, man, as soon as they found out went to Guatemala, I mean, it was Katie bar the door.
Why was everybody so reluctant to travel? It seems like I don't do desk jobs. Oh,
okay. They're scared. Okay. And then I started helping doing training with the what they call their SRT. So I introduced the M16A4 into the Marine Corps. I introduced it to diplomatic security. And so then we helped standardize their weapons because they had M16s, long barrel, short barrel. And we went to Colt and helped them get a contract because we knew how to do this. Okay. And then got M16A4. So I helped write up their lesson plans, help out their PowerPoint presentations. So my boss told me, as long as you do your work, I don't care what you do. So it opened up the door. Yeah, man. I just going back and forth to Mexico. I was working with, guy. I always mention names that are good guys: Carlos Canino, Harry Pinati, Dino Ortiz. Attaches out of Mexico or Monterrey, and we're giving classes to the prosecutors, to everybody: Guatemala, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Mexico. But see, my wife has been with me 46 years, so she's a Marine wife.
Okay.
So you go for 3-4 days.
That's nothing compared to...
It's nothing. It's like a break for her.
I mean, and at the same time, I do understand the traveling aspect, because you can't pay me to go to Mexico right now.
I would go, and here's the reason I would go. I don't stand out, for one thing. I don't go to nightclubs.
I would stand out a little bit.
Well, you would, but not as bad as you think you would. I don't go to nightclubs, and I don't go chasing young ladies. So I go there, do my work.
Those would be two big problems of mine. So
I don't stand out.
Gotcha. Okay, so you keep your head down and do.
And I would always stay at the hotel they told me to stay, because they had me stay there because of security reasons. And so it just, as I understand, they don't do that at all anymore. But that's how I got involved with all. So now they start depending on you. Say, hey, we heard that this device is in Mexico, this gun. Can you look at these for us? And what is this machine? So they would have like a milling machine being sent to Mexico here, barrels being sent from here. So they would send it to me so I could put it together. So, because I'm also a machinist.
Yeah.
So well, this is a mill machine. It's used to cut flat. Used to be used to cut flat things. With CNC now, it can cut anything. But a basic mill machine, and a lathe is used to turn circular items. And these barrels are used for 40 millimeter grenade launchers for real. The barrels going south.
Yeah.
40 millimeter grenade launchers. So then they could put all these three together and say, now we know why they're all going through Joe, because
Gotcha.
And so that's the niche I found, that nobody else wanted to do it. I'll do it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded fun. I'm not gonna lie to you. It sounded very fun.
And the different people I met. See, if I work at, I use this term endearingly. If I'm a bench monkey and sit at my desk every single day, I learn the regulations, but I don't learn how they're being used in the field. I don't learn how they're being used in court. I don't learn how this country is interpreting them and stuff like this. You learn so much more when you're picking it up and you're sitting with the U.S. Attorney and the special agent, because everybody has a different knowledge. So I don't know how to do cases. So I'm listening to that agent tell me how. I'm listening to write up an affidavit for a search warrant. I just put in the technical piece.
Gotcha.
So all of those things help you develop more experience and more knowledge.
So it's kind of like the difference between learning to speak Spanish on an app versus complete immersion.
Exactly. That's a good way to say it. If you listen to an app and then you, I'm glad you said that. Then you get to Mexico and you get 1,700 different dialects.
Like, what did you say?
What did you say?
That's so true.
And then you're in El Salvador and they have so much Indian background, and
you end up offending the wrong person.
So it's a big learning curve, and that aspect of my, as a matter of fact, my last 2 years with ATF, they stood up a new firearms division in field ops, and I moved over, and all I did was training and going out in the field. My boss, a great guy, John Oakey, former Navy guy, he just retired. He said, Rick, when they send you a request, just tell me where you're going. Do not ask me.
You need friends like that.
Well, he was a great supervisor, and it was making the division look good. Because I wrote an after action on everything I did. It could be 5 lines.
But there was something.
There's something that they could take up to their boss and say, "This is what we accomplished last month." Not, "Hey, we sat on here and we went to coffee and this and that and the other." We're always producing.
Gotcha. So let's bring it down to the civilian level a little bit, right?
Okay.
So I know, like, there's always this talk about assault weapons, right? And you mentioned you being part of the administration when Clinton was in office. I had an idea background about where that whole assault weapon thing kind of came from, as far as the understanding and the definition of it. But from your perspective and your background, where did that all come from? Like, was the ATF Did ATF play a big part in that, or was that something that was politically concocted, and then it was like, here, this is what we're going to start calling these things, and therefore that's how we're going to use this terminology to push this type of legislation or agenda and so forth and so on?
I think it was 50-50.
Okay.
And Senator Feinstein, I know she's gone now, but she was the biggest impetus for this.
Okay.
So what you need to look at as a person who's a firearms guy, look at the 1988 Treasury study and the 1998 Treasury study. So 1988 and 1998. So basically what happened is Treasury looked at importation. This started out where the names and everything came out for importation. So you got a two-legged thing going on. You got the Congress, Senator Feinstein, looking at guns that they don't like that are being used by criminals, the Tech 9s, the Macs. And if you look back at what they were looking at, they're antiquated guns.
Yes, very.
You're like,
yeah.
God, you got rid of a Mac 9. Thank God. Now I got an SR9. Now I got a copy of the MP5.
Yeah.
You know, thank you, Senator Feinstein.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When you look at it, they created, I don't want to get distracted, a niche for the industry to develop better firearms. I shouldn't say that because somebody's going to... So in importation, they looked at the importation of non-sporting firearms. And I'm going to get a little bit into the weeds.
No, dive.
925D3, it shall be unlawful to import any semi-automatic firearm, rifle, or shotgun that if imported will be banned from importation under 925D3 as not being particularly suitable for sporting purposes. What does sporting purposes mean? Thank you. I just gave you a silver platter. Make it up. So what is sporting purposes? So it started out separate pistol grip, flash suppressor, bayonet lug, night sights, and the ability to accept a high-capacity magazine.
So basically everything that superficially seemed like it was designed for war.
A military firearm. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So our industry's smart. Said, okay, what can we do to get these guns in? And I have a whole paper I wrote on this.
Yeah.
I'll give it to you.
Okay, please do. Yeah.
Starts from 1968. It goes all the way to today. Well, if we remove these features, we have a featureless gun to Mac 90, modified AK. That's how it came in. So they made this goofy thumb hole stock. Took all the other features. All it could take was a high-capacity magazine. It still can be imported. So then it progresses. Then we have the assault weapon ban. Well, what's an assault weapon? Well, once again, it's a features test. Flash suppressor, pistol grip, high-capacity magazine. Oh, we can stop all the imports on anything that accepts a high-capacity magazine. What's a high-capacity magazine? Oh, thank you. Another silver platter. We'll make this up. Anything above 10 rounds is a high-capacity magazine.
So who's making this? At the ATF or is it Congress?
Well, at the time, it's Treasury.
It's Treasury, gotcha.
These are regulations. These aren't laws.
Yes, but so that was their kind of way of creating law, utilizing regulations.
Yes.
Okay, because of the ambiguity of what these definitions are or what they're supposed to be or want them to be.
If this was to go through today, because Chevron's been taken away, so the agency was allowed to tell the agency what was a bad feature.
Gotcha.
So, because who else told them? So now they came up, industry smart, and I always use the AK. So we made the Wasser 10. No features and only accepts a 10-round magazine. Okay, then how are all these guns in the United States being sold that accept a high-capacity magazine? Now, we haven't got... Keep thinking of Feinstein.
Yeah,
we haven't got to that yet. We're just talking about ATF and Treasury.
Okay.
So when they passed 922R, and I've got all the dates in the paper, and I'm trying to think, it might have been part of the FOPA, but I can't remember. It says it can't be imported. Semi-automatic shotgun, if assembled. So what does assembled mean? If I put a Canadian buffer tube in a Colt AR-15, Now I've got a banned firearm. Colt had just set up their factory in Canada and was bringing springs and components and buffers and bolts into the United States, and Colt's dead in the water.
Yeah.
So they passed 478.39 in their regulations, the 20 components. So now Ed Owen, being the genius he is, said, okay, these are the 20 components that every firearm has. You know, the trunnion, the bolt, all these different parts. If you put more than 10 of these imported parts on a firearm,
that are not,
you can't assemble it. Oh, that's like, then the assault weapon ban sunsetted. It was like floodgates open up. So now with 478.39, I thought, this if I assemble this AK with only 10 parts, I can make it like I could make it before 922R was passed. So they wrote a letter in. Council reviewed it, said, they're right. So now the gun that was banned from importation cannot be imported into the United States, but can be made and assembled and modified in the United States. So the firearms industry has set up 922R compliant work tables. So this gun comes in, it's a Wasser 10. I use that, everybody knows it. And as soon as it comes in, they mill the lower receiver out to take a high capacity magazine. They put their United States parts on it, cheapest of ones they can use, the stock and the handguard. So there's 2. And an American magazine, there's 3 right there. So now you're down to only 10 foreign parts in the gun. And you're building the same gun that by regulation you stop from importation.
You know what I find ironic about this is they spend so much time focusing on the AR-15 when in reality, if we really want to think about it, because a lot of it was Genesis was the importation of these firearms, it was really the AK platform.
It was.
That's the funny thing.
But see, the AK is not importable. I mean, they are, because it takes a high capacity magazine.
Gotcha.
So it must be a cost issue, because I know the industry members.
But what about the fact that that a lot of the ARs were being built here anyway?
You're exactly right. So it's not an importable firearm.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So it's a U.S. made firearm. It has nothing to do with the import.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised they're not making them overseas because of cost factor. Now,
I think I know why. So I think from a consumer standpoint, I mean, AR-15 is seen as America's rifle.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I think that's why companies are a little hesitant to start kind of outsourcing the production of those things. That's just my guess. I don't know.
And you're probably true. Yeah. And plus, when it comes down to cost, how could you beat the cost of manufacturing today in the United States when there's 300,000 AR parts manufactured?
That is true. That is actually very true. Yeah,
brought the cost down so low. Yeah. I mean, I can order today the components to make an AR less than $400, and a good AR.
Yeah.
You know, is it going to be a match grade AR? No, but I can kill you 300 yards without a problem.
Yeah.
You know, so now on the other side of the street, Senator Feinstein and all that group, Schumer and all those have been working on banning firearms that were in use, that were being used by criminals, cheap guns. The Mac 90, the Tech 9, the AK types, FALs, all these type of firearms. So they coined the term assault weapon because it had certain features, or it just had a high capacity magazine, like the Mac 10. It doesn't have a stock. It doesn't have a bayonet lug.
Yeah.
You know, it's a semi-automatic open bolt, which is easily converted to a machine gun. So those, and the Tech 9, they made, as soon as the law came out, they made I think it was called the AB9 after Band 9. They took off the shroud and the threaded barrel, and then they literally on national TV said, "Thank you, Senator Feinstein," so their sales went through the roof. But look what it did to the industry. How many junk guns are out there anymore? They don't exist.
It's almost like they forced the gun industry to modernize.
Yes, the guns that are coming out today are just incredible.
Yep.
Look how many copies of the MP5 there are out there.
You tell them, I got several of them.
You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah. And I honestly, when I have the ones that are like copies versus like some that I know they're official, and I'm looking at them like, I mean, I'd be okay with this one. Like it is that good now.
They are.
It is exceedingly good.
And that's what I tell everybody. You know, what gun would you recommend, expands this and that, the other? I said, everybody's is a different pay scale. You know, if I'm making $30,000 to $40,000 a year, I'm not going to go buy an H&K pistol. It's not going to happen. I'm going to go buy a Taurus or something like that for a simple reason. I'm not going to shoot 10,000 rounds to it. I'm going to shoot enough just so I can have something to protect me with. But if I have the bandwidth, you know, then I'm sure you bought a lot of these SIG firearms. You know, if you have the bandwidth to purchase those, then you're going to buy the cream of the crop.
And I try to tell people that all the time when I do my gun review videos and I talk about different guns. My natural inclination is to lean towards the higher end of models because I'm not functioning from a need basis at that point, because I can get what I need at a lower price point, generally speaking. However, when you start getting into I call it the connoisseur gun enthusiast, so to speak, you start appreciating the smaller things, that the differences from an experience perspective are not massive, right? Like you said, you can build a $400 AR from parts and still be effective in terms of usage. But I mean, why do people decide to drive a Ferrari instead of a Honda, for instance? You know, there are certain aspects of the firearm that I start to appreciate a little bit more.
And I would drive a Honda so I could buy that gun.
Touche.
Right?
Yeah. No, seriously. But I mean, that's also, I think, the beauty behind the firearm industry, because when you start thinking about the Second Amendment and how it's supposed to be applied to the people, you know, there's no barrier of entry financially. Generally speaking, whatever price point that you are financially, you can find a firearm to fit your need. Whether it's at the lower end tier from a financial standpoint, not necessarily quality, because I always tell people now, modern advancements in firearms, like you talked about, they're so advanced now, you're very rarely just going to pick up a shitty firearm.
I'm so glad you said that, because that is so true. You know, I threw out Taurus out there. In the 70s, you couldn't give me a Taurus unless I needed an extra fishing weight. You know, but they have come along. Look at, I hate to say this, and it's scary. Look at the guns being made in Turkey now that have come. Everybody's using the Turkish manufacturers to make all the shotguns. You know, because I don't need to be a gifted fowler or machinist. I need to be a gifted drawer. So I draw that thing that the computer can spit out. And so now, if you have the right technology, I hire a kid from high school who took a couple of courses in computer-aided drawing and got a little bit of know-how. Then I pay an engineer to draw exactly what I want. I put it in my computer cuts it. Okay, I don't like it this much. I tweak it. It comes out on the third time. I start spitting it out. And then I got people assemble the firearm. So you can make state-of-the-art today easily compared to 40, 50 years ago. If you ever look at the technology that went into making our military firearms during World War II, you know, you'd have rows and rows of milling machines or lathes, and each one would have a fixture. So the bolt was cut, this radius was cut on this fixture, and then Joe would take it and cut this radius, and then this flat was cut. So then the bolt, you know, you might have had 20 hands on it to cut it, but it was precise and accurate. But now technology has taken all that away, and one person turns a machine on and sets 0, and the machine does what those people used to do.
Which is great. I don't know why my brain went to this, but immediately when you talked about how the guns were built back then, I started thinking about the SR-71. I don't know if you're familiar with that plane.
I am. I saw it land in Dulles.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, man. I still have yet to see it in person. I'm obsessed with it. I'm literally obsessed with it.
Did they still have one in San Antonio?
I didn't know they had one in San Antonio.
Yes,
I literally went online and tried to see where they all were, and I didn't see a location in San Antonio. I might have overlooked it.
But they had one. My son and I were driving.
Like, I literally have goosebumps
around Dulles Airport, because I lived in Winchester, Virginia, right outside Dulles. And I looked at, that's the day it set the record of 68 minutes when they parked it at the...
when they did, I think it was from here, was it from here to London? Like New York?
From Sacramento to Dulles.
Oh, okay.
When they were parking it at the museum.
Okay.
And you're just kind of driving by, what is that?
Even today,
because it was coming down to land,
and those things are massive.
and the highway people were locking brakes up to pull over because it came in because it's that part of the Smithsonian is at Dulles Airport.
I didn't know. I'm gonna have to check now because if it is, I will literally drive there this week. Well, I can't because I'm traveling. But yeah,
no, Dulles.
No, I'm talking about if they have one in San Antonio.
I thought they had one in San Antonio at the Air Force Base.
I'm gonna check because if they did, I will be out there ASAP because I've yet to, and I've been kind of lazy because I was gonna fly somewhere because I was gonna go to Dulles. That's actually where I was thinking about going. But I love that plane. But when you think about how they built it. It was all rulers. Like there was none of the technology even close to what we have now. And then the fact that even still to this day, it still holds the speed record. It's insanity.
But its last flight, it was 68 minutes, wherever it was in California, San Clemente, wherever it was, to Dulles Airport.
I think is me and Peter actually. Where were we, Peter, when we saw the F-35s?
Oh, we're at the airport in Alabama.
Alabama, yeah. And so they would. I don't know if they were training. I don't know what they were doing, but they were taking off, landing, and I'd never seen one before. And I'm looking, I'm like, good God! And even to this day, I know for a fact if I saw an SR-71, it would pale in like those F-35s would pale in comparison to my reaction to seeing that. Like, I mean, it's the most beautiful, epic, gorgeous. I love that thing. I absolutely love it.
Well, you need to go see it.
I do. I absolutely do. But no, man, I really appreciate you joining me today, man. We could honestly have gone on for hours and hours, but what I want to do is create an incentive for you to have to come back.
You know, my suggestion to you, pick up a subject and give me like headwind because I'll have it in writing for you and say yes. This is like the date when 478.39 was passed and stuff like that.
Perfect. Yeah,
and people need to understand that the firearms industry, and that's what I do for the firearms industry. I've worked for most of the big manufacturers and many small manufacturers, and explain to them what is manufacturing. Because manufacturing isn't what you think it is when it comes to the government. It's about taxes and control. If I assemble all these pieces together, I didn't manufacture anything I assembled.
Yeah.
You can say I made it, but I didn't manufacture it.
Yeah.
But for the government, it's manufacturing. So I have to be licensed as an 07 manufacturer to do that. And if I do more than 50 a year, I have to pay excise tax. So many of these young guys, they're losing their license. It's their fault, but it's not their fault.
Okay.
Because they don't know what they're doing, and they just jump into business and start doing things. And then they create an issue that the government has a black and white on.
Gotcha.
Comes in and go, especially under this administration.
Yeah.
You've heard the horror stories.
Yep.
People getting shut down. So they've got the black and white document, and they come in and say, well, you weren't licensed as a manufacturer. You didn't pay excise tax. You did this. You didn't mark them like you're required because manufacturers are required to mark. So there's so many hits that they get, and they can lose their license.
Gotcha. One more thing I want to bring up. Maybe we can talk about this next time, but if you know a little bit about it, PLACA. I can't remember. I always forget the acronym. I always say like the law that was designed to protect manufacturers from being sued for the use of the firearms, by criminals and stuff like that. What is your background in understanding? I've always wanted to speak with somebody to get them to communicate how that was established, why it was established, and how dangerous it could be if it wasn't there in the first place. So I don't know if that's in your wheelhouse.
Very little knowledge on that, but I can tell you because of some of the lawsuits that have been won, like the shooting.
Protection, Lawful, and Commerce and Arms Act. Sorry, that's
the lawsuit of the shooting. What was it, Connecticut, where all those companies ended up going out of business. They would shut the firearms industry down, literally, if that law was not, especially with this frivolous lawsuit. The way we look at who's being sued in Uvalde now. The firearms manufacturers are being sued. They're suing everybody. And it's all. I have a lot of sympathy for what happened, but when you start doing a lawsuit like that, that's somebody trying to get paid. And they're being coached to do that, as you know. And
I've done multiple videos on it because I also know the strategy that's being used by the anti-gun organizations for it. So there's people trying to get paid, and then there's the anti-gun organizations who are utilizing those suits to undermine the industry and bring it to its knees.
And you're exactly right. Yeah. They will pursue. They are ambulance chasers.
Yeah.
They will pursue somebody who's been injured and try to get them to sue. And I've been approached by different organizations to ask me to work for them, and some of the, I don't want to mention their name, but some of the very big anti-gun organizations asked me, they wanted to talk to me, and I had a conversation with them. We had a polite conversation, and I told them my feelings, and they asked me for what recommendations. I said the recommendations are, you need to start putting the criminals in jail.
Yeah.
And if you want to stop it, you need to start educating and doing task force. Cut and dry. You start educating in elementary school.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a young Hispanic in Los Angeles, and I grow up around gang members. That's all I see. And at 10 years old, they start getting me to mule, cigarettes, marijuana, whatever, because if I get caught, they're going to do nothing to me.
Yeah.
But if you start teaching me in 3rd grade or 2nd grade that these are the violations of the law in a child way, and if you shoot somebody, it's wrong, you're not allowed to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And then the task force, you have got to get, 90% of all the crimes in one area in New York are committed by 10% of the people?
Yep, I try to communicate that to people all the time. They just don't get it. That's literally.
And if you know where those 10% of the people are.
You know they know who those people are.
And you arrest those people, you're still going to have criminals.
But it's not going to be anywhere near.
You're going to cut out 90% of it.
Yep.
And so we talked 2 times, and they liked what I said because they know my position on firearms, but I'm not a beehole. I'm not going to start screaming at you. You know, because they all started out with a cause that they thought was a righteous cause. It's just politics derails everybody.
Yep. Like I said, like I pointed out, like that's really what it boils down, especially when that money starts getting injected into it, and the money is coming from people who have their own political agendas, right? Because not only, and what I try to explain before, I haven't started explaining it. These people are smart. They're smart, they're clever, and they have resources. And not only are they trying to sue manufacturers and try to undermine the industry, now what I'm starting to notice is now they're going after other communicative platforms. So like the YouTubes, the X's, all of these things. And so they're applying pressure quietly, whereas they're almost threatening lawsuits and legal liabilities for stuff that has nothing to do with these platforms other than, hey, this is a platform where people can create content.
Yep.
And what they're doing is they're trying to force these platforms to change their policies on firearm content by way of using the legal system to do it, right? Because things like PLACA is making it increasingly harder to do that. So now they say, okay, well, what are we going to do now? Let's go attack the platforms that allow these people to have a voice. Like the YouTubes, like the Instagrams and things of that nature, and then scare those platforms. Because the platforms, by and large, they're in business to make money.
That's correct.
Right? So in their minds, they're like, so if that pressure is only coming from one side, then they're going to cave to those demands, essentially. Like, look, we don't even want to deal with this right now. We already have a lot going on. You know, the firearm content is probably a smaller portion of what makes up this platform. So fine, all right, you want us to change this policy because of reasons and to make it seem like you guys are getting something done. Fine, we'll do that, I guess. And so people don't understand the inherent danger of that because that is cultural. And once you start attacking the culture side of things in that manner, so now like creators like me and other people in the 2A space. Now we don't have platforms to communicate this idea like you talked about. Like, so now the only vision and the only examples of firearm ownership that people who are younger than us that are coming up behind us, the only vision they get of that is what? Street violence, right?
Exactly.
That's it, right? They never see the responsible owning and the gun use of it. See, when I came into the firearm side of it, it was by way of YouTube. And I saw responsible firearm ownership being presented in such a way where I used to think it was only people who had guns were gangbangers. So that was my only perception. And when that was countered with the information I was seeing.
This is my counter argument. And this,
please.
They don't like this.
Yeah.
I say, I own firearms, right? Do anybody here own firearms? You know, of course, nobody wants to. Yes.
Yeah.
Have you ever committed a crime? No. Have I ever committed a crime? No. Am I going to sell drugs tomorrow? No. Do you intend on selling drugs tomorrow? No. If you pass a law today, only us in here are going to abide by that law. So you pass a law all the time that only affects the honest citizen.
Yep.
So why are you continually passing laws when you can arrest the criminals today? And silence, because that is the answer. Do not pass any laws. Enforce what you have. If you really want to get criminals off the street,
Yeah.
if you just want to disarm us, then say so.
Yeah.
I just want to disarm you.
Yeah. But you know what? I think this is my belief system, and then I'll end with this. The reason why they don't care for that approach is because they can't take responsibility for it.
You're right.
Right? Because if I have a movement that's largely started from emotions, and understandably so, right, and justifiably so, inevitably what ends up happening is I want to feel like I'm doing something that I can take ownership in and say, because of my grief, because of my pain, the way I felt about this, I was able to make this change, and then I can own it and say that. When you start talking about task force, and then saying, okay, well, no, let's actually do something that'll be effective. A lot of times when it comes to solutions, the real solutions that work are usually not very sexy. It's like, okay, they set up a task force, they got rid of 90% of the people who are committing the crimes, and now crime is down.
We disarmed the police.
It's kind of like, oh, well, I guess hooray. But when we can say we got this law passed that says nobody can own these firearms that are so scary, and now we can take these guns away, and that's how we're going to solve crime, then you can stand up on your soapbox and say, we did this, look what we did. And you can raise money doing that.
Yes,
you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
And you know what I'm saying? So that's why I think when they're faced with real solutions, like you just pointed out, because I remember reading a book called Don't Shoot. And in that book, and I talked about this when I was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and I remember reading it a long time ago, they talked about how they had this test program in Boston, in the inner cities of Boston, that were dealing with an influx of gun violence. So, like you pointed out, they knew within all of these younger kids who were out here on the streets causing problems, there was only very few who were actually shooters, who were actually engaging in the violent crime. Right. And most of them, they were still criminals, still doing criminality. But what the police came in and said was, look, they literally got them in a room. This is how much they knew. They got them and set them up in a room, and they were like, look, we know you sell drugs. We know, and then they would show them, we know you sell drugs out of this building. We see the guys walk up and do all that stuff, right? And so now they got their attention. They're like, shit. And we're not saying we're going to turn a blind eye to it, but we will say this. If the killing doesn't stop, we're shutting all this shit down. That's essentially what they said. And they said it dropped almost overnight. Because inevitably when it ended up happening, now you could make the argument things are a little different now, because back during that period, you had more of an organizational structure of hierarchy where you had a kind of a leader and things like that. He can say, all right, stop this bullshit because you're cutting into the money now, right? And inevitably what ends up happening is they started noticing that the violence dropped. The criminality and the drug stuff didn't necessarily drop, but the violence did. And then they started implementing these things in different cities, and they were getting the same result. But they hit a roadblock because of what? Politics.
Yep.
Because the politicians can come in and say, hey, I was responsible for doing this. And so inevitably, it just kind of fizzled out. And so that, to me, when you talk to me about how you give the example and you say, okay, well, I have a gun. I haven't killed anyone. I'm not going to kill anyone. I'm not going to sell drugs. And all these laws that you're trying to create only stop me from doing it because I have no intention on doing it in the first place. That reeks of the same kind of essentially just the dynamics that are involved when politics take more precedent over actually fixing and coming up with solutions.
That's the perfect example of what's going on today.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, man.
Thank you, young man.
So what I'll do, most definitely, like I said, I'll come up with a couple more topics that I think, because we only scratched the surface about who you are and what you do.
Like first date.
Yeah, I know, right? You're paying, right?
I got it.
But no, we definitely got to have you back on, whether it's in person or virtually. Yeah, because I think there's so much information that I think a lot of my audience would be able to
And
take.
I like to help the firearms industry. I get paid to do this.
Yeah.
But I do so much for free. People say, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Because hey, some people just need help.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, man.
Well,
Much
thanks for
appreciate
having
it.
me. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
One thing's for certain and two things are for sure. Politicians and tech giants don't want gun content to be recommended to you. And we're all fighting this culture war together. Now, you can help do your part by liking, commenting, subscribing to the channel, but most importantly, sharing this video with at least one person. Together, we can stop the suppression of our 2A rights. And don't forget to click the link in the description section of this video for the products that I mentioned in this video.